are there any other questions before we go on? How are you guys doing? You still with me?
Good.
Rabbi,
Yes. Right.
Rabbi, I have to give example about the nether.
Okay.
Yeah, concerning about Yipta's
Oh yeah,
daughter,
Yiftach.
that
Yeah.
she will,
Yeah.
Yipta, di ba? Yipta make a vow to the Lord. And now that vow, we know that it cannot be sacrificed her daughter because that is abomination to the Lord, Adonai.
Yes.
So the daughter, he means to say that she will serve in the tabernacle and never get married, and that is considered what, a vow, or can you clarify that,
Sure.
Rabbi?
So there's a midrash. There's a midrash that says that instead of killing her, he just locked her up in a cave, and she never was allowed to be courted by a man. She never was allowed to be married. Never allowed to have a family. So, because in Judaism there's an axiom that to never marry, to not have children, is akin to death, right? Like, so it's just kind of like, By the way, if anybody's childless, this is not an insult to any of us, right? It's just saying this is an axiom, right? So one way it's interpreted is that it was the same as offering her up. I like the idea of having her serve, like helping in the temple or something like that. But of course, the plain meaning of the text is that he offered her up, right? So yeah. So who knows? We can hope that the poor girl didn't go up burnt up as a burnt offering, but it was a false vow. It's not a kosher vow, right? Kosher is not just about food. It's about anything that's that's permissible or not. And so, whenever a vow is made by someone and it's an illegal vow, you can't make that kind of vow. Then, first of all, the vow doesn't stand. You don't even really need a sage to annul it. You should have made it in the first place, right? Although some they prefer to have it annulled, right? So a scholar can annul that vow, right? They can knock it out and say, no, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. God doesn't want your daughter burnt. What, are you crazy? What's wrong with you, right? And so really that's the teaching I think that comes away from Yiftach. Because he was ignorant of Torah, his daughter either died or had a horrible life or whatever you want to say, right? She had to suffer because of the father's ignorance and his arrogance to not go and ask Pinchas to annul the vow. Yeah. Okay. Did that answer?
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rabbi. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Sure. No, it's nice. Okay, so let's look at verse 5 then. If there's no more questions, who would like to read? Whoa, that's a big verse.
Rabbi, can I
Yeah.
read?
Yeah. You go for it, Yomar. Go. Yes,
Can I read?
please.
Tulong tigas tulong. Veshama aviha et nidra, ve'esara asher asera al nafshah, ve'cherish lah aviha, ve'kamukol nedareha. Ve'chol isar asher asera al nafshah yakum.
Great. All right, so let's translate this long one together, guys. How do we translate this? Veshama aviha. Okay, what's that about?
And her father heard.
Yep. Well, okay. So and or if the vav is being very very flexible here. So vav, it doesn't always mean and or but, right? It can be a conditional. It can mean when or it can mean if, right? So or we might just have to supply the if in English to make it make sense. Yeah. And hold on, why is it not letting me write? Let me write. Oh, here we go. So if her father hears, or and her father Shama hears, right? If he will hear, or and you could literally just be literal, and her father will hear. What will he hear? Et nidra. Okay, what's nidra?
Her vow.
That's right, her vow. So hey with a mapik, just like hey without a mapik. These are both pronominal suffixes for her. So he'll hear the vow, or he'll hear about the vow. But esarah, what's that mean?
Her oath.
Yeah, like her privation, something like that. The way she's denied herself. Oath. Yeah, you're right. It's a synonym with oath, although usually it means you're. We don't really have a word in English for this. I can think of other than privation, right? Like or an oath of privation, I guess is what we'd have to say. right? She's promised to deprive herself. Asher, what's Asher?
which
Asher,
she swore upon her life.
nice. I was pointing on the wrong monitor. Yep, nice. Upon her life, good. Or concerning her life. Vehecherish la. Who knows what this means? Who knows what charash, the root charash?
Be quiet.
Yes, very good. Oh, you telling me to be quiet? No, I'm just kidding. Yes, and so this is the hefil of be quiet, which means something like he keeps his silence, right? Like he doesn't speak up, right? So the hecherish, and he keeps his silence, lah, to her or concerning her. Who's the he? Aviha. Now here's something I think it's time to share with you guys. There's a pattern that happens a lot, but it doesn't always happen in Tanachit. I'm gonna put a yellow circle around these three words, if it lets me. There we go. A lot of times we have this pattern where we have verb and then subject following it dutifully, like it should. And then what will happen is, if it's a small indirect object, we call this the IO when we're labeling sentences. If it's a small indirect object, it'll snake its way in there right after the verb. Look at that. Even though we expect the subject to be next. This is a very, very common pattern. You'll see this a lot of times, especially if we have lamed with the suffix, right, being the indirect object there. So, and he keeps himself quiet to her, and then we get the father. So we got to fix it now. And her father keeps his silence concerning her. Okay? So you guys understand? That's a pattern you see a lot. It's not a rule. Just one moment. Yeah, then you do what? There's a what? Oh, good Hashem. Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's continue. V'kamu.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Sorry, can I... about the word asar?
Yeah, I'm going to try to multitask while you ask me the question, okay? So there's something else I got to do real quick, so hopefully, go ahead. Just speak. I'll try to listen. Yep, about asar?
Rabbi, what's the meaning of asurim? Like asurim, it's plural. I know it's plural. Oh. I read about in Isaiah 61, Bela asurim, Beka choach. I think it's the duty of Mashiach. Isaiah 61, Rabbi, it's
Hold on.
Ruach, Adonai, Alay.
Okay, hold on. Let's take a look there. Isaiah what?
Isaiah 61, Rabbi, I think it's verse 3.
Verse 3.
Bela asurim, Beka choach. In the asurim. Into the asurim, Beka.
Are you sure? 61? Chapter 61?
61.
What verse?
Yes, Rabbi. I think.
Which verse? Verse 3?
I think it's verse 3. I think verse 3 or verse 2.
Lasum la'avlei Tzion latet lahem ve'er tachat efer shemen sason tachat evel matei tehila tachat ruach kecha ve'korei lahem elei hatzedek mata Adonai litpa'er. No, it's not that verse. Not that one. Maybe it's a different chapter.
I think, Rabbi, sorry. It's in verse 1. Sorry. Verse 1.
Verse 1? Okay, let's see.
Yes, Rabbi.
No
Sorry,
worries. Let's see.
This is the Haftarah of Yeshua. Luke 14. The Haftarah of Yeshua.
Okay. Right. Let's see. Oh, okay, yeah. Asurim is captives. It's like one who's been bound. This is a noun that's been formed from a passive participle, and so you understand. So it's like being to be tied, to be bound, etc. So it's like so it's a captive. And asur is a captive. You understand? So deror,
Okay,
yeah, deror. If you want, I can put it on the screen. Let me float. Okay, float the window, and then we can just pull them down. There we go. Okay. Right? So if you look here, asurim, before we have deror, right? So this actually helps a little too. Like, remember last Shabbat I talked about deror yikah? Deror yikah. So deror yikah means liberty will call out, right? Like it's called, the song is calling for Hashem, the Shabbat song, calling on Hashem to come and bring liberty, right? So you have this nice context of liberty, liberty for the captives, for the asurim. You see, it's formed from a passive participle. It's a nice example you bring up because it's just like the one we were talking about from bachur, right? A bachur, like a chosen man, i.e., a marriageable aged bachelor, is a bachur, right? But if it's just a participle, it can mean something of choice value, right? Like the chariots being of choice value. So the same with asur. Asur, it's derived, the noun comes from the passive participle, from asa, to bind. So really, the girl in the example, she's binding on herself this thing, right? She's binding on herself this privation, right? Or a binding. I've been translating the noun as a privation or an oath of privation, right? Where it's really literally like a binding, right? Something she's bound to herself. Okay?
Okay, Todara.
Yeah. Okay. And it was Independence Day in America today. Oh, that's not
Okay.
supposed to happen during class
Now,
time.
before you continue,
Yes.
okay.
Go ahead.
Before you continue,
Huh?
Rabbi, can you say again? I missed, or rather, I did not quite understand the verb, indirect object, and subject that you encircled.
Okay.
Can you say that again?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure,
Thank
sure,
you.
sure. Okay, so this will be good too for those who are still not back from the kitchen or whatever too. So what I'm saying is here, there's a pattern that happens. Actually, I'll use the black space down here, okay? You guys already know that we have this pattern. Of course, we're reading. Oh, hold on. I gotta. It's changing. Ooh, it's raining hard outside. If I get cut off, hopefully it won't happen. But if the internet gets cut off, you know what happened, okay, guys? It's not like I just dropped you. It's we have some pretty heavy rain up here in Upper Antipolo right now. Okay. All right. So go back. Okay. So look on the bottom, the black. We know that the normal order of things in Tanachit, we go right to left, right, and we have verb plus subject, don't we, right? The subject usually comes after the verb unless there's special emphasis, right? If there's special emphasis, then it doesn't, okay? Well, what also happens is very often, more often than not, the indirect object, if it's a small word, a very small one, likes to sneak in right here. He jumps in. Excuse me. He jumps in. That's the IO, the indirect object. Okay? Right after the verb, he sandwiches in right before the subject. And that's what we see happening here, up here. Here's our verb. Here's our subject way over here. And then the indirect object, because he's a small word, just jumped in. With Hebrew style in the Bible, this happens all the time. Okay? If it doesn't happen, if the indirect object comes after the subject, there's no special emphasis for that. Okay? It doesn't really mean anything weird is happening. It might be for a rhyme or something, but very often it happens where he'll just jump in there. Do you understand it now? What I'm saying? It's a style issue, really.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Thank you.
It doesn't have to be this way. It just often is. Just kind of a pattern you'll notice the more you read. All right, are we all back now? Nice. Yopi. All right. Should I continue, or I know I'm the one who initiated the break, but I don't want to start unless most are back already.
Rabbi,
Are we?
Rabbi,
Yes.
I just want to comment that the la there, there's hey, there's a dages. That's a guttural. How can it be that there is a dages
Yeah.
there?
So let me show what Tom's asking about. I want to change the color, and I'll draw it on the lower part of the screen. Okay. Let's pick orange. So what Brother Tom's asking about, we have a lamed, and then there's the hay, and inside our hay, there's what looks like a dagesh. Okay. Really,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
What it is, it's called a mapik. It's not a dagesh. It looks exactly like a dagesh because 1,200 years
Ah,
ago, they don't have computers and fonts and stuff. So they've got a limited number of signs and symbols they can do, right? So the Masoretes, they invented this guy. Looks just like a dagesh. You're right, and you're also right. It's not allowed in a hay. It's not a dagesh. It's called mapik.
yeah,
Let me write it for you. Mapik.
yeah, okay.
Mapik. So what a mapik does,
Mapik.
mapik tells you to aspirate the hay,
Mapik.
right? So if you notice when Yomar was reading, go back. He didn't say la, he said la, right? We kind of exaggerate the H sound at the end. Usually when there's a hey at the end of a word,
Yeah.
the historical reason for the word, usually, not always, if it just ends in the hey with not this one, not aviha, but if it was just like susa like that. The reason for the hey was just so that we
Yes.
knew it was an ah sound, right? Because they didn't have the vowel markers, right? So they
Yeah.
used the hey to spell ah, right? Okay, so it just meant ah. It wasn't that hey was part of the root or anything like that, right? So unusual words like susa, susa, right? A female horse, a mare. The purpose of this hey
Yeah.
was only to tell us there's an ah, because we didn't have the comments back then. There was no comments, right? So like in the Torah scroll, you see the hey,
Mm.
it'll show you. It's okay, it's ah, susa, right? But what if I want to make? What if there really is a hey there? There's really a hey there as part of the root sometimes. There's actually a few words. There's a few verbs that have a hey with a mapik as part of the root. That means the root actually is a mapiked hey. It's kind of amazing. One of them is kaha. Kaha. In case you care, let me write this. I'm looking for space. Kaha. This is an actual verb. And notice, the second root letter is hey. The third root letter is hey with mapik. That's how the verb naturally occurs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kaha means to dim, to grow dim, right? Like we see, like some of our ancestors, their eyes will grow dim, right? That's what this is, kaha. Okay? Yeah. So good question.
Okay. Thank you,
Sure.
Rabbi.
So this is lah, right? Okay, very good.
Mm.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi,
Uh huh.
silakli, anilo yakulla asor otecha, albeaya internet.
Oh, besede, besede.
Anilo yada about PowerPoint.
כן, כל בסדר.
silakli,
אם אתה רוצה,
tara.
אני יכול לשלוח לך Salmi or Salmai. If you want, I can send you my images, right? Like images, take pictures.
Ken, toda.
Kol beseda. Okay. Tov li. Write to me. All right, so let's continue. I'm going to assume everybody's back from the breaks now. Great. And I'll try to edit this out. Vekamu kol nedareha. Okay. So, vekamu. What's kamu mean?
Stand.
Stand.
Resurrected in someone.
And will stand. They will stand.
Arise.
All, yep, it could be arise also, true. In this case, probably stand is better. All, this is the subject of the verb. Nedareha. What's that mean?
Her vows.
All her vows. Yep, good.
Her word. Her word.
V'chol isav. In all or every oath of privation, right? Every oath which she denies herself something. Asher, what's asher? Which? Asera. Asera, Yomar?
She bound.
She bound.
Yeah, good.
She
She
bound.
bound. She bound. And this is so
She
you
bound.
see how we get from here to the word that Yomar was asking about in Yeshayahu and Isaiah. So we put it in the passive participle. Asura. Asura would be a female prisoner, a female who is bound. You see, Asurim are prisoners, or not really captives, but like prisoners. They're bound. That is, they're bound. Maybe it's metaphorical. They're bound by a house that they can't leave or something like this. But so you can kind of see the logic, how some of these words are created from the verbs. Okay, which she bound al nafsha. What's that mean?
Upon her soul.
Upon
Yeah,
her life.
yeah, upon her soul, upon her life, right? Upon herself. Sometimes it can be more just loosely defined as self. Usually, this word translates into the Septuagint as a suke or psyche, depending on pronunciation. Psyche, right? The psyche. Isn't that kind of interesting? So you can see how the Greek really, the psychology should be the study of the nefesh, right? The study of the nefesh.
There's also a mapik there,
Yeah,
Rabbi. Mapik.
exactly. There sure is. There sure is.
Yeah, I saw
Sure is.
that looked like a dage.
Yep, exactly. Yep, there sure is.
Looked like
And that
Yeah.
tells us it's her nefesh, right? If it was his nefesh, how would I say his nefesh, guys?
That's feminine.
Yes.
Nafsho.
Rabbi.
Yes, correct. And if I want to say his, nafsho. Very good. Very good. Okay. Yakum. What's yakum mean?
will stand.
Yes, very good. They will stand. And so notice here, guys, let me change the color. Okay, we'll see if this is visible. So notice here, we have Kamu. This is perfect, right? But then the Vav changes it to imperfect, right? You'll see this stylistically a lot of times in Hebrew. So we start with a Vav consecutive to change a perfect into an imperfect form of the verb, right? So future or ongoing. And then we'll end, later on, we'll kind of close this off with an actual straight imperfect of the same verb with no Vav. See, this is already imperfect. So these are both in the same time, the same tense, if you will. Imperfect. You guys understand? You see it? Kamu means they stood, right? They arose. Vekamu means and they will arise. Yakum means they will arise or they will stand. So they mean the same thing. This is just a pattern you'll see a lot in the Torah. You'll have an imperfect with a vav consecutive in front of it, and then later with the same verb just in the imperfect by itself. Okay? Vice versa also happens. Okay, any questions? All right, Yofi. Let's look at verse 6. Who'd like to read verse 6? That's a big one. Someone who hasn't gone yet, please.
ואם הני אביך אותך ביום שמו כל נדריך ואסוריך אשר אסרה על נפשך לא יחום ואדוני יסלח לך כי הני אביך אותך.
Very good. Very nice reading. Yeah, good. Okay, so the im, what's im mean? Do you guys know what im means? Im. If. Very good. Very good. If. So you guys remember the trick in how to remember the difference between trying to find a space to write. Okay, look at the upper middle, okay? Im versus im. What's the top one mean? If, right? Naomi said if, right? Yep, I think Omar said too. What's aim with an ayin mean? With. And even though today we read them the same, so do you remember the mnemonic, a way to remember which is which? Just think of the order of the alphabet. At least this is how I used to remind myself, because I used to confuse these. So think of the order of the alphabet. In English,
Rabbi, I only know Immanuel
Im what?
with us, God. Immanuel with us, God.
Oh, yeah. Immanuel. Nice. That's a good way. That's a good mnemonic to remember that prophecy, right? About Yeshua. Very nice. Immanuel, right? Im with anu from anachnu and el. That's good. So here's the one I usually recommend. I in English is alphabetically before the letter W, right? Same thing in Hebrew. Aleph is before ayin, right? So those they work hand in hand like that. And so if that helps, that'll help. 'Cause sometimes people get those confused. Or you can use Yomar's method. You can think of Immanuel, and if it's not the Im from Immanuel, then it's the other one. The only problem is people might forget how to spell Immanuel, right? So they might think, is it Aleph? Is it ayin?
One thing, Rab, is Im Eshkachech.
Yeah, from the Psalm.
Eshkachech.
Yeah, Psalm 127. Very nice. Yeah, Tishkach Yamini, diba? Yeah, very nice. Im eshkachecha. Very nice. Yeah, that's a good one too. But again, since we pronounce them the same, even if someone memorizes that, they might not know, is it Aleph or is it Ayin, right? It kind of depends on if you're a visual learner or not, right? So I think it's still useful to have this little trick here. But yeah, very good example. There's also a longer form of this. What about Psalm 23? Do you remember it from Psalm 23? Gam ki elef, the gate salnavet lo. Very good.
Yes.
Yeah. Lo.
Imadi.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
You got it. Yeah. Good. Good.
Something.
Imadi. Very good. Imadi. That's the longer form. Imadi. Imadi. With a pronominal suffix. With me. I said this in Israel one time, Imadi, when I was new. I said Imadi from the song. Nobody uses that word anymore. Usually they say eat in Israel for with instead of im. Yep. So, okay, very nice. Okay, let's continue. Very good. Verse 6. Okay. Okay, so Be'im, and if, Heini. You guys know Heini? This is kind of a new one. This means he annuls or cancels, makes of no value. Heini. Okay. So if he annuls, now what's the subject? Aviha. What's Aviha?
Her father.
Yeah.
That's feminine. Feminine, yeah.
Yep.
Feminine.
Yep. There it is. The feminine ending. The feminine suffix, I mean.
Feminine suffix, yeah.
Her Abba, right? Aviha, her father. That's the subject. So if her father annuls, otah. What's that mean?
Did he owe her?
If her father.
There's also mapik there, oh. Mapik. There's a mapatik in last letter.
Oh yeah. Yep. 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 Sure is. So otah, right? Otah.
Ot-
Yeah. Good. What's the otah? What's it telling me, guys?
Her.
DDO, her.
Yes, that's
It,
right.
it,
That's
the
right.
one, the
That's
old
right.
it.
So really, it's kind of like her. If her father annuls her or it, right? He doesn't. He contradicts, right? He doesn't allow it to stand. Beyom shom'o. Beyom shom'o. Okay. So what is happening here?
On that, on the, on the day,
This is kind of complicated.
Shamuo. Shamuo.
on the day he hears it,
Yes. Very good.
on the day,
Very good. One of you's got some static. I'm just.
On a day.
Who is that? Okay. I think I got the person that was it. Okay. I won't say anything. I won't embarrass. Okay, so we have a construct chain here, don't we? But look at the last part of the chain. This is an infinitive construct. Okay? It's the infinitive construct. Remember, I told you it's sneaky. The infinitive. Pardon. Not so sneaky. But infinitive construct doesn't always translate nicely into English, right? So sometimes we have to massage it a bit, right? But it doesn't make sense to say in English, in the day to hear it, right? In the day hearing, right? So in the day hearing, who's hearing? We have our suffix, vav, right? What's the vav tell me? Go back.
E.
Yeah, exactly. The
Me.
day in which he hears it.
referring to the father, her father.
Yes, exactly. This the vav refers back to her father. So it has to be the same day that he hears about the vow. If she made the vow a month before and he just hears about it, today is the day he has to decide. Hashem is just. He's not like, oh, too late. Mr. Val, she promised the rest of her life to give 90% of her money always. It's like, the father just heard about it. Now he can annul it. Okay? And it's the day. Why? Why is it the day? How do I know it's the day?
Suffix, pronominal
Right.
suffix.
Remember the three ways to make the last word definite, guys? Suffix is one of them. So it's literally like his hearing, right? His
Proper.
hearing. And so
Proper noun.
it makes the whole phrase the. Remember, we have to make the whole phrase the. If the last word is definite, the whole phrase is definite, the whole chain. So in the orange is going to tell me the day of his hearing, like the day he learns about it. In the day of his hearing about kol nedareha. What's that mean?
All her vows.
All her.
Yung
All that she vowed.
Yes. All her vows. Right? Here it's a plural. This shows it's a plural. All her vows. Va'as ve'esareya. Pardon me. Ve'esareha. Okay. Another suffix. What's that mean?
And her binding.
And
Yeah. Very
binding.
good.
Privation.
Yeah. Privation, bindings. Exactly. Yep. Those things are good. And her bindings, her privations. Asher asara. What's that mean?
Which she
Which
bound.
she bound.
Her.
Good. Al nafsha. Okay, what's that mean?
Upon her
Upon
soul.
Good.
herself.
Good. Lo yakum.
Shall not
It
stand.
will not
Yup.
stand.
It's like Gandalf. You shall. Okay, it will not stand. Vadonai. And now look. Now this is interesting. So the father is the one who's doing the cancellation of the vow, right? And look, now we have the subject of the next verb with special emphasis. Ah, wait, that's annoying. Yeah, okay, let's see. All right. Okay. Here's the subject. You guys hear that one? That was a pretty loud one. Where I grew up, we always had thunderstorms. I love thunderstorms at night when it's time to sleep. So we would expect the subject to come last, right? So what does this tell me? That Adonai is before the Yislach.
Adonai shall bound
I'm
her.
not bind. Oh, Salach. You might not know the word Salach. You know Salachli?
Shall
Send her.
Forgive.
out.
Yeah, forgive.
Shall send
Forgive. It's a new word. It's a new
out.
word. You guys didn't know this one yet. Forgive. Don't confuse it with Shalach.
Rabbi, in
Don't
modern,
confuse it with
is it in
Shalach.
modern is excuse?
Ah, yeah.
Excuse? Silakli, excuse me. In
Yeah,
modern.
yeah. It's also forgive me. Yeah, it's the same like as the English someone will say forgive me when they bump into you or whatever. Sometimes they'll say that depending on where they're from. Yep. Salachli. Yep. Okay. Okay. Yislach lah.
So, sorry, Rab. Is it connected to Selicha
It is.
in
It
the Yom
is. It
HaKippurim?
absolutely is.
Madam.
Very nice. Yeah, that's right. And sedechot,
So that
the
means
sedechot we say
excuse me.
before.
Telekot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that excuse me?
Well, yeah. Well, you say
No,
salachli.
forgiveness.
Salachli.
Forgiveness. Plural of
Okay, got
Selichot. Selicha, Selichot.
Yes. The sedechot are the petitions that we say leading up to the days of awe. Are the sedechot, like kind of like we're leading up to the mood of forgiveness, right? The sedechot, right? So you can see how it's related to the verb, right? And here we have. Sorry, I didn't give myself enough space to make a nice lamed. So we say, Salachli, forgive me, or I'm sorry, excuse me, etc. Salachli.
Slicha?
Yeah,
Slicha?
you can just say, yeah, you
Adonai
can just say
Selichot.
slicha.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Slicha.
also slicha, yeah, slicha. Salachli, slicha, yep. Both of those. Slicha is with the emphatic hey at the end. Okay? Nislach la ki heini aviha ota. Okay, what's that mean? Because, right? Ki because. Heini. Same word we had up here. Heini.
her father.
Yeah.
Her father forbid.
Yeah, he canceled it. He annulled it. Something like that, right? Yeah.
Cancel
Yep.
her.
Ota. Exactly.
Because her father canceled.
Exactly. Namely her shavua, her oath. Good. And
So Rabbi,
yeah.
sorry Rabbi. So Rabbi is that's why the Adon na Selichot,
Yes.
the Yom Kippur.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Adon na Selichot.
Right on. Yep.
That.
Nice. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Great. Let's move right along then. Move right along. Oh, actually, hold on a second. I thought I had something I wanted to share with you on this. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's next verse. Next verse, it gets very interesting. Okay. Okay. So the idea is, but Hashem will forgive her, right? Her father annulled it, and Hashem, special emphasis, Yislach la, right? Usually we would expect Yislach la Hashem, right? Or Ve'salach la Hashem. but instead it's coming before, so we have some kind of emphasis on who's the forgiver, right? The father can cancel, but Hashem still has to forgive her because she uttered a rash oath. Okay. If you enjoy the video content we put out, please stand with us financially so we can continue to produce quality Hebrew education content. You can sign up for a monthly donation at www.patreon.com/HebrewLiteracy. If you don't have to give, please pray for our ministry. Todah Rabah.